Hello, everybody, and welcome to What's the Story podcast. This is WTS 335. My name's Danny Murray.
And I'm Graham Merrigan.
How are you, Graham Merrigan?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, man. I'm all right. I'm tired. But sure, who isn't in this day and age?
Absolutely. Especially when you are raising a child.
Yeah, I mean,
And two huskies.
yeah, that's very true. Yeah, the Huskies are probably causing more tiredness than the child is at this point now. But yeah, look, sure, billions of people have done it before me, Graham. I'm nothing special, and in actual fact, I'm less than the average punt because Cubes is doing the vast majority of it, and I'm very much just on the fringes, going, "Good job, yay," etc.
Is that since you're back at the work setting?
Yeah, mostly. But it's like, in fairness, work have been brilliant. Like, they're so flexible with me, which is great. And I work from home, which means I have a lot of opportunity, thankfully, to kind of be around Haley and everything else. But no, I'm just very much like I've no idea what I'm doing, and very much just relying on Cubes and her knowledge and wisdom, like I do with everything in life, to be fair. So.
Lovely.
She doesn't listen to this podcast, but that's probably the most I've ever put her
What do you
over.
mean she doesn't listen to her?
She doesn't. She said she hears enough of my shite anyway. So,
She's
and,
probably
and even though she doesn't listen to it, I will say, as we're recording this, 3 years married tomorrow. So happy anniversary, Cubes.
Is it 3 years married?
3 years married tomorrow, Graham. Yeah.
OMG.
Yeah. Feels a lot longer ago.
And your operation anniversary is coming up too as well.
That's right. Yeah, it'll be 3 years at the end of June. Yeah, June was a big month for me 3 years ago.
Why are you laughing?
Oh no, I just thought that was funny.
Will you mark up both of them?
Yeah, probably with a burger.
Or some chicken tenders?
I had chicken tenders for dinner tonight, man. Honey buffalo tenders from Bovine here in Portlaoise, and sensational. I
Chili
absolutely,
honey seems to be the latest fad, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. Yeah, hot honey seems to be the all the rage, and I'm not mad at it. Like, I'm okay with that,
Yeah, same.
you know.
It
But
is good.
but yeah, that's, I don't know. Sorry, what did you actually ask me again?
Um,
I don't know. It's gone.
I don't
Anyway,
know. It's gone.
right. Yeah, lovely.
Rewind there.
Lovely. We had a brief chat last week about classic jerseys, and I note you are wearing yet another stunner.
Yep, Italy
Yeah, yeah.
with the Badgers.
Oh, very good. That's a Euros jersey.
Yeah, I can't remember which Euros it was, but it's Italy Nike.
Yeah, it looks early 90s, does it?
I think it might be 2000s, early
Oh,
2000s.
early 2000s, all right. All right,
Yeah.
fair. I would have thought they were Puma in the early 2000s.
Well, you could be right. I'm not sure.
I don't know. We really need to do a geeky classic football jersey podcast, Graham.
Absolutely. My cousin Craig, who's an avid listener of the show,
Yeah,
said he enjoyed that section of the show last week. And
brilliant. Good
he
man, Craig.
still has the original Fiorentina Nintendo jersey, so he does.
Fabulous. Actually, do you know who would be brilliant to get on to talk about that?
You
Or Dr. Colin Kearns, who we had on previously talking about kicking racism out of football, or
let's get him back on.
tackling online hate in football.
Let's get him back on and let's talk about retro jerseys.
Yeah, Colin is an encyclopedia of knowledge about retro football, I'd say. So,
Really, is he?
well, I remember in school he just had obscure stats and what. So I don't know why he strikes me as the type of guy who just loves the retro. I could be I could be defaming the man as I speak right now out loud, but he strikes me as the type of guy who would be a retro jersey encyclopedia.
Ian Mann loved obscure stats as well, didn't he?
Ian Mann is one of the brightest brains of my generation of Ballybrack people, and I don't think he got the credit he deserved for being as on the ball as he was with a lot of obscure facts.
Excellent, very good.
Yeah,
A nice tribute to Ian Mann there. Hi.
yeah, it was indeed. Yeah. Anyway, right. Look, this week, Mero.
Yes,
We go on. Right. I'm tongue tied.
we
You go
we
on.
we were looking for someone to talk to in regards to the Vince McMahon scandal. So we reached out to one of the sharpest minds in the wrestling business, and when it comes to business analysis and legals and stuff like that. He owns his own website, Wrestlenomics, and he's part of Pollock and Thurston, which is a weekly podcast on post wrestling. We are interviewing the brilliant Brandon Thurston. Brandon, thanks so much for the opportunity to talk to you about all things, I suppose, Vince McMahon, and we might go into the business side of things with TKO WWE. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this
Thanks
the
for having me.
is this the first time you spoke to two Irish guys on a podcast?
I think so. I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yes,
We'll take that. We'll take
we-
that.
we'll t we'll take that.
Uh,
Go ahead, Dan.
no, I was going to say, like, obviously the Vince McMahon story has kind of gripped not just the wrestling world, but it's kind of spread far beyond that. And then earlier this year, when the Netflix documentary came out, or the Netflix Mr. McMahon series came out, it kind of got people talking again, and I'm kind of wondering, did it sort of tell us enough? Did it not tell us enough? Well, for people who maybe aren't familiar with what has happened over the last, or what's unfolded over the last couple of years, Brandon, bring them up to speed.
Oh boy. So let's see. How much time? How long is this podcast? Um, in as condensed a way as possible. Um, One day in June of 2022, all of a sudden, the Wall Street Journal broke a story that was saying that Vince McMahon had paid $3 million for an NDA, an agreement with a woman who was formerly employed by WWE. A little while later, it turns out there's not just one NDA of such a case, but there's four. Um, you can also look back over history, and there's two other cases where Vince was accused of sexual misconduct in earlier years. There's another case from way back in 1986, Rita Chatterton, the former referee, who accuses him of sexual misconduct back then. And Vince has been in and out of the company. We can get into that too. But he finally resigned after Janel Grant, whose story really started getting this ball rolling. She sued him in January of 2024. 1 or 2 days later, sponsors started to pull out of the Royal Rumble. I'm sure that exuded a lot of pressure in TKO, and he resigned, and he's for the foreseeable future out of the wrestling business, which is, it's emerged to me as one of the biggest stories in pro wrestling history, where we have hands down the most powerful figure in the history of the industry has been pushed out.
Well, that's like, if you had asked anybody up until the recent past, you know, can you imagine WWE without McMahon in it? They'd have said only when he dies, and he will probably
Agreed.
die in an arena during a show. He's never going to leave.
Mhm.
And this story unfolding and everything that's gone along with it has, like as you said, it is one of the biggest stories in the history of pro wrestling. And it's a pity that it's such a dark story, and that I'm kind of conflicted in terms of, like, the truth coming out is obviously a good thing, but just the sort of severity and the heinousness, if that's a word,
Yeah.
of what
Right.
has been perpetrated. Like,
Right. I've used the word misconduct in that, but that's we could get very specific. I don't know how specific you want me to get, but there's horrible allegations
yeah,
that are alleged in Janelle Grant's lawsuit, numerous instances of sexual assault, and she alleges that she was also sex trafficked
yeah,
to another executive named John Laurinaitis. She alleges that she was also trafficked to Brock Lesnar, although they never met in person, but there were messages exchanged between them. There were images exchanged. They were supposed to meet a couple times, but did not. And the day I read her lawsuit is, it's one of the most horrible things I've ever read. And we have that case. There's another case of an NDA involving a former talent whose identity we do not know, who alleges that she was coerced into oral sex in 2005. That's related to a $7.5 million NDA. There's two other cases where employees allegedly were subjected to sexual misconduct by Vince McMahon. There's, again, the Rita Chatterton case. There's the California spa case. There's the Boca Raton tanning salon case. So a number of allegations over a long course of time against Vince McMahon, and he's alleged to have done some really terrible things.
And you mentioned John Laurinaitis there, and to try get
Yes.
us kind of up to speed,
Yes.
a development involving John Laurinaitis kind of emerged over the last week or so.
Right. Right. So John Laurinaitis, who wrestled as Johnny Ace back in the day,
Johnny Ace.
in WCW and All Japan. Anyway, he'd been a longtime talent executive in WWE, and when this lawsuit came out, so he is also at the beginning was a named defendant along with the company. So WWE, the company, is still involved in this case.
Mhm.
Um, so he was named as a defendant as well. Janel Grant alleges that he sexually assaulted her as well, including with Vince McMahon in W headquarters. So she alleges terrible things against Laurinaitis also. And in the days following that, an attorney for Laurinaitis said that, oh no, John Laurinaitis is a victim of Vince McMahon as well. So that was his side of the story for a couple months. And then he came back and said, no, wait, I corroborate everything Vince said. I deny all these allegations. Basically made it, I'm on Vince's team here. That was May 2024. And then come around to just the other week, he has gone back again and he has come to a settlement with Janel Grant. He has been removed as a defendant and he has agreed to provide her with evidence. What that entails, we don't know. Could be communications records, could be a deposition. We don't know, but they've come to some pretty hefty agreement because him being dropped from the case is with prejudice, which means she cannot re-add him. She has agreed to not re-add him to the case. So it means that they've made a pretty significant agreement here.
And is this a good thing though? In terms of Janelle Grant, is this a good thing that John Laurinaitis has like not to be distasteful, but it does actually
Mm,
sound like a WWE storyline where
it
John
does, yeah,
Laurinaitis is going back and forth and
right.
now he's in her corner, so to speak. Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing?
If if there are truth to the allegations, let's say, and if he has great evidence that will help her case, that's the good thing for her, right? Because she
Yeah.
can get again, if her allegations were true, she can get the justice that she's seeking. I suppose if we're thinking it through in terms of monetary, in terms of whatever settlement or judgment that could this case could result in, um, maybe John Laurinaitis is just not a very wealthy party here compared to the other two. That is Vince McMahon, who's definitely a billionaire, and WWE, which is a multi-billion dollar company. Maybe there's just not that much monetarily to extract from him as well. So the stakes, the benefit to her perhaps of keeping him in the case were not that big to begin with.
Yeah.
But
And
that's just my speculation. Yeah,
do you think the WWE board did enough with when the initial allegations surfaced in 2022?
that's a good question. So as you mentioned, the board announced that they were doing an investigation. And for people who may not know, a board is like mostly part-time people who have great executive experience, and they meet, once every month or two, and they get together and they advise the executives. There are also executives like Nick Khan, who's the current president of WWE, who are on the board, and they're supposed to get together. They have dinner and they give they give advice to the leaders of the company, and most of them are not day-to-day executives. And they're supposed to sort of oversee and look out for shareholder interests. So anyway, they announced that they were going to do an investigation, and we know very little about that investigation in terms of what it actually produced. Any reports that it produced, we don't have those publicly or anything like that, or any recommendations that they may or may not have made. What we do know is there's not only is there this Grant case involving Janelle Grant, but there's this separate shareholder case. This is a shareholder class action where some shareholders who held WWE stock at the time, it's actually a pension fund, is one of the main parties, one of the main plaintiffs here. They've come out and said, we're suing the members of the board of directors, including Vince, to say, this is really related to the merger. So I'll try not to get too off the path here, but they're alleging that the merger was not an honest process because Vince he predetermined the process and he was really worried about not being able to stay in the company because he had just forced his way back in. But anyway, they alleged that as part of this, that this investigation was a sham. These board members did not do an honest to God investigation. They didn't do a genuine job of it. We have meeting minutes that they allude to that are not public. They say that this wasn't really a substantial investigation. That's what they say. So to answer your question, according to those plaintiffs, no, this was not a good investigation. According to our reporting, we do know that. And we did publish a policy, an employee consensual relationships policy, which was not a policy of the company at the time that Vince allegedly did these deeds, but it is something that was enacted after the investigation was announced. That basically says that if you're a board member, if you're a top executive, you can't have romantic or sexual relationships with other employees. But if you're below that level, you just have to disclose them. So that's not something that existed. It now exists. As far as whether anything has been done or whether the culture has changed, the biggest negative that I would point to is WWE's hiring of Lee Fitting, who left ESPN. So after a number of sexual misconduct, it sounds like sexual harassment allegations pushed him out of his position at ESPN, where he was a major producer of a popular program called College Game Day. WWE hired him in the days following, in the days before Janel Grant's lawsuit was filed. So it's in the midst of this cloud of misconduct allegations. They were willing to hire him. I'm sure he's a talented production executive, but you're in the midst of this huge scandal, and you're still willing to bring into your company as one of your top executives someone who was pushed out of ESPN surrounding allegations of misconduct that are very much like, yeah.
It's like the self-awareness of an elephant there, because the Lee Fitting stuff was known. Yeah. It's known in the industry. It's known in entertainment, and
it was not. So there has since been an article published with The Athletic. So it wasn't like a public story until several months ago. I think until the beginning of this year. But but to that point, I think it's hard to believe that W executives could not figure that out. Did not know that. Did not have lots of connections with people at ESPN, including Nick Khan, who has served as an agent for numerous ESPN on-air talent. It's hard to believe that they would not do their due diligence and figure out what was alleged against him.
Absolutely, it's depressing, that, and even when Vince tried to get back in, which he actually did get back in.
Yeah.
He ousted his own daughter and his son-in-law, and he got back in. Aren't there suggestions that the first Wall Street leak was Stephanie?
So,
or is that substantiated at all?
So the Wall Street Journal reports in June, I believe the date is like June 15th, 2022, and they report that the board had received an email from a friend of Janel Grant. They're not using her name at that point because she hasn't gone public yet, but they're referring to her as a former paralegal. So the way that the board finds out about this is purportedly secondhand communication from Janel Grant. Now, how did the Journal learn about this? Their style of attribution doesn't say it's somebody on the board. It just says, I think it's something to the effect of people familiar with the matter. It could have been someone on the board. I don't want to source guess, but who could have been anyone on the board, or could have been somebody who just had knowledge of it and just wasn't on the board either. But there's something like 11 board members at that time, so you could look to those people.
It was someone out to get Vince, though, wasn't it?
I don't know. So there's like I said, there's independent members, and I think it's I think for the public, there are Stephanie is a board member. Paul Levesque is a board member. Nick Khan is a board member. And all those people are also serving as executives at the time. And here's something else that's an interesting wrinkle too, right? Is that Stephanie, a month earlier, had announced that I'm going to go on a temporary leave of absence as an executive, which she was the chief brand officer, I believe was her title at the time. She decided she's going to leave. And then, but only temporarily, and not going to leave the board. So, I mean, but by that time, the board has received this communication about Janel Grant's allegations. So make of that what you will. My point I'm trying to get to is that there's these other, non-public figures who are board members, including Jeffrey Speed and Manjit Singh and Ignacio Laud. It was just not as exciting to think about them being the ones who would disclose this to the Wall Street Journal. So, but there are these really famous celebrities too, like Paul Levesque and Stephanie McMahon are board members.
You mentioned there the pension fund that's also suing. Uh, like
Yes.
the the business now, like I mean, it's easy to say the business ramifications, like because as we said at the start, Vince McMahon is so intertwined with everything that was WWE, but the business ramifications of what he has, what is alleged to have done, what he's done, like thi- this ripple could be felt quite a way into the pockets of WWE 2KO now. Like, what sort of figures are we talking here?
In terms of money that he paid for NDAs.
Sorry, no, in terms of potential settlements or lawsuits that are pending through these cases that are ongoing.
In terms of like what the plaintiffs and the
Yeah.
amount of money the plaintiffs might get out of them. So to be clear, like the shareholder lawsuit does not involve WWE as a plaintiff. I don't know if they
Okay.
would have any monetary liability at risk here, but they are parties in the Grant lawsuit. They are parties in the Ring Boy lawsuit, which we haven't talked about yet. Um, the I mean, millions of dollars could be,
Yeah.
could be. I mean, like it's not that unusual though. It's for companies to be involved in lawsuits and to come to settlements. I mean, they came to a settlement with a wrestling company called MLW a couple of years ago in an antitrust case, and that was disclosed to be $20 million, which is, I mean, it's a lot of money to me. Uh, it's a medium amount of money to WWE. It's not insignificant at all.
A
Um,
lot of money for MLW though.
yes, certainly.
Yeah.
Um, but I think when you're a big company like WWE, you're always considering the risk of legal action and what that's going to mean for you in terms of settlements you might have to pay. I mean, look at UFC
Mhm.
has agreed to a $335 million settlement of one of their antitrust lawsuits, and that is a
Yeah.
big settlement. I mean, if it's something as big as that, it could it could be really substantial for the company.
Reputationally, of course, the damage that's being done is there also. And you mentioned the Ring Boy case there, and
Mm,
this is one that people who follow wrestling have probably heard of, but people who
yeah,
are either extremely casual or they don't, but they've obviously heard of WWE, they've heard of Vince McMahon. I think this is a story that's likely to horrify even
yeah,
more,
yeah.
given the circumstances of it. If you don't mind, again, give us the kind of the cliff notes, without
Yeah.
trying to be too dismissive of it, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. So this is mostly alleged to have happened in the 80s. We do have one allegation now that's involved in this as early as the 70s. There's some things that are alleged to have happened in the 90s too. So there's a former ring announcer who you can find on certain TV tapings for quite a while in the WF throughout the 80s. His name is Mel Phillips. And he's alleged to have he hired all these ring attendants to help him set up the ring. I mean, the notion is that he was on the road and it was part of his job to help get the ring set up. So what he would do is he would find kids, minors, who would help them set up the ring. And he's alleged we now have 8 ring boys who are plaintiffs. Perhaps there are more who would allege similar, who allege that while they were recruited to be ring attendants, they were also sexually abused by Mel Phillips. Um, Mel Phillips died in 2012, so he's not around. There's also one plaintiff now who alleges that he was sexually assaulted by Pat Patterson, who was a major producer and essentially an executive at the time. Most of this misconduct is alleged against Mel Phillips. Pat Patterson has also passed away in 2020. But so who the defendants are here are the company itself and Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon. And it's alleged that they were negligent and that they should have known that Mel Phillips was doing horrible things with them. And we do have a story of he was let go from the company for a short time in 1988. It's alleged that he was let go because Vince allegedly knew that he had something that's described as an inappropriate relationship or inappropriate fascination with boys. There's all this stuff about his foot fetish. In any case, he's alleged to have brought him back then a few weeks later and just told him to just steer clear of boys and basically don't do that again. Brought him back, and there are allegations against him that are alleged to have occurred after he brought him back. Um, so that would be a big part of the case for
Mhm.
why allegedly Vince and the company were negligent. So
But didn't Vince tell Phil Muchnick in an interview?
exactly, that's what I'm
Mm.
referring to. Is that what he had this conversation with the reporter Phil Mushnick, who uh, explains that Mel Phillips was let go in '88, but we brought him back a few weeks later, just with the caveat that you steer clear of boys.
And it's funny how this didn't hamper Linda McMahon's uh, kind of. She's
Right,
now in the Trump administration and the
right,
second, the education. It's just,
right,
I mean, it's such a different era now. Like if that was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, the person was
yeah,
forced to resign or,
right.
it's just it's a different world we're living in now where these type of allegations, there's no there's no seem to be any collective anger over it. Even the Janelle Grant lawsuit within the, I suppose, the internet wrestling community, there doesn't seem to be shock as such, you know.
No, yeah. I mean,
Um,
like we're talking in a week where there's been uproar about our truth being, not his contract not being renewed.
Mhm.
And I think you could look at that comparatively and say, oh, there's more outrage around our truth not working for WWE anymore, his contract expiring and simply not being renewed than there is about the litany of allegations around WWE and around Vince.
but even the Royal Rumble, I think it was the Royal Rumble. I think
Hmm.
you might have been in attendance at the post press conference where Paul
Yep.
Levesque said, um, he kind of dismissed that he saw the lawsuit or he didn't. You
I
know
asked him,
that
have you read the lawsuit? Do you have any reaction to it? And he just sort of stared off and said, no, I haven't. So
like how was he not ready for that question?
I don't know. I don't know. I can only imagine, if you're on the PR team, I imagine you want to prepare him for that, but ultimately the executive has to want to be prepared and has to want to participate. I cannot imagine. I'm sure he's a busy guy, but it's you had to have known that questions about that were coming.
And do
Yeah.
you think the talent are? Do you think the talent are confident talking about it when they're being asked about it in podcast interviews
No,
and stuff like that?
I think
Yeah.
definitely not. I would not be because you're on the W team and you don't want to do anything that's going to upset them. Um, I don't know. It's on one hand, it's surprising to me how many people are still favorable towards Vince. There are some who are not, including I would say Seth Rollins has distanced himself. But there are a lot of people, especially people from an older generation, who I think a lot of
Yeah.
these people just look at Vince as essentially a father figure. And in terms of business, in terms of their lifestyle, I'm sure they owe a lot to Vince. And they became successful, rich, famous people because of their working relationship with Vince and they probably never saw the side of him that is alleged to have been there. So I don't
It's
know. No,
almost
I think
cult.
they're
It's almost cult-like, isn't it? Like you only have Seth Rollins coming out and Kevin Owens,
yeah,
and obviously CM Punk before his
yeah,
return and even after
and
his return had spoke about. Becky Lynch might
yeah.
have spoken briefly about it
John
in
Cena has been very supportive of him. I,
Mm.
th-
Undertaker
I
and John Cena is so supportive. It's so cult-like. It's like, lads, no, come on.
I guess I look
You
at it like parents. You have like somebody who's convicted of a crime even. And to be clear, there's no crimes that have been charged, let alone convicted, related to Vince. But I imagine it's like family members who are just who are in continuous denial that their family member could ever be capable of such things.
It, it's
yeah.
it's such a strange one to watch it play out.
I
Like,
think too, sorry to interrupt, but I think too,
yeah,
there's just a probably a really loose understanding that they have of what is actually alleged. Like I would, has Triple H read the lawsuit to this day? Have these people read this is a 67-page legal document. It's in many ways it is not fun to read.
Mm.
How in touch, how aware are they really of what has been alleged? I question.
I read it and I just I just couldn't believe some of the stuff that I was reading. And
Yeah.
you're kind of reading it and going, why would she lie? In terms of some of the specifics, whether himself and Laurinaitis and herself in the boardroom specifically, you're kind of thinking this is revolt. And if any of these talent had read any of it, there's no
Yeah.
way they'd be coming out and
Yeah.
saving face and showing off that is it a cult in there in Stanford or what's the story, you know?
And in a sense, like I don't expect, and Cody was asked whether he believed Janel Grant at one press conference, and he kind of, I think he said he didn't know enough to have an opinion, basically, which I think is probably the safest thing for him to say.
Yeah.
I guess I feel like I don't expect, especially talent who are like below the median of standing in the company, to be able to safely say much about it, even if they do believe that these are horrifying allegations. And and if they do believe them, I think the higher up talent, the people who should be more confident in their positions, who are major stars, who the company really relies on, I think they should generally feel more freedom to speak their mind.
And do you think Ari Emanuel will actually completely cut because Vince still is small shareholding, isn't he?
He owns 4% of the company, which is worth over $1 billion. He can't, but like Ari Emanuel can't, as far as I know, can't force him to get rid of his shares. I mean, he sold a lot of it off, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about. A lot of people just think he's gone completely. He has gone completely in terms of being an officer, in terms of being an executive, in terms of being a board member. He has no day-to-day relationship with TKO other than he still owns a lot of stock by virtue of being the biggest shareholder in WWE at the end. Even though he has now sold about $1 billion worth of his stock, he's still got another billion that is still equity.
Th- this part of it is something that I haven't really thought too much about other than when we're talking, and it's that, it's largely an entertainment business aimed at families, right? It's like the merchandise is young kids, all that kind of stuff. That's who they're aiming. They know families to spend the money buying all the stuff because the kids want it.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like this has a massive impact in terms of reputation and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but there's been no sign of kind of the juggernaut slowing down as such in terms of the financials. Is there, like, the merchandise sales still seem very, very healthy? There doesn't seem to be any, as of yet at least, there doesn't seem to be any real kind of pushback or backlash in terms of that family orientated demographic, or am I missing
Right.
something?
If anything, it's been the opposite. It has been the opposite because there's a few things happening. Is that Vince was in charge of creative, and he was ultimately responsible for everything you see on the screen. And I think Vince, for a number of years, wasn't a very effective head of creative, and he created a lot of frustration. He created, in my opinion, the opportunities. His frustration of the audience and of talent was essential for the opportunity that became AEW and gave rise to WWE's biggest competitor in decades. Um, Vince being removed from the creative process allowed the creative process to be different, to be not hindered by Vince. And whether there's a real effect there or not, I think certain fans would argue, but there's definitely been an increase in WWE's fan popularity after Vince is no longer involved in creative. So there's these offsetting factors here. But to your point, I don't think there's a significant negative impact from fans. I think a lot of fans view like, oh, they know something bad happened, some controversy is happening, and Vince is gone now. They know that he's alleged to have been involved in sexual misconduct and stuff like that, but he's gone now.
Hmm.
And I think that's the executive summary for most people, and they love their favorite wrestlers still.
What sort of timeline are we in with regard to proceedings then? And,
Yeah.
it, how will this, or, is there a timeline for how this will play out then over the coming months or longer?
Yeah, this is where we get to talk about my favorite subject, arbitration.
Yeah.
Uh, so, like with all things, all legal matters, I don't know how it is in Ireland. I know Conor McGregor just had some issues, right, in Ireland, but um,
He
Yeah,
should be
so
that's the polite way of putting it.
yes,
but
yes,
that's a good kind of correlation because
yeah.
McGregor is hated in Ireland,
Mm.
overwhelmingly
He's
hated.
running for
But
president here, I heard.
Oh man,
he is overwhelmingly hated here. But
there's
Yeah,
as much chance as McGregor winning the presidency here as me winning the next Royal Rumble, just to put that very much in context.
he still seems to be beloved in America. So, you know, that's and on the probably the same stand as Vince, because if you remember, guys, when this first came out, Stephanie went out on SmackDown and Vince
Yeah.
retired, and
Yeah.
it was like,
Yeah.
thank you, Vince. Like,
Yeah.
when this all goes away, I wouldn't be surprised if Vince appeared on television again. Maybe not, but I mean, it's WWE after all, and considering the yo-yo attitude of John Laurinaitis going up and down here, I just wouldn't be sure that we definitely have seen the last of Vince on WWE TV.
Maybe. I mean, it depends on what the resolution is of these cases, I guess. But I
Mm.
mean, to try to put it down like a likely path, I guess suppose like let's say there's a settlement. Let's say um what I'm almost going to talk about here, right, is this case might go to arbitration because the NDA had an arbitration clause in it, which arbitration is a private process, which gets it out of public court. Well, let's say it goes to arbitration and we never really hear about what happened, and maybe Janel Grant gets some money out of this, and let's say there's a settlement in the Ring Boy lawsuit, and then some years go by. That's like, and let's say he's going to be 80 soon, but let's say he continues to live a relatively healthy life. I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, you think about Triple H's Hall of Fame speech a few months ago, where he did mention Vince and say, and thank him. Um, I'm really curious about what the relationship is between those two people, because I think there's he Paul Beck himself said there's a lot of it's complicated, which tells me, oh, there's been some ups and downs in that relationship, I'm sure. Um, but I wouldn't rule it out. But if you're Endeavor, if you're Ari Emanuel and Mark Shapiro, I don't think it's a good idea to approve that. I know he's your family member and all this, but I don't think that's a great idea. I don't think it's impossible though.
And with
Yeah.
arbitration, when will we know if it's arbitration or a public court proceedings?
Yeah. Um, Probably not for not for months, probably. So what's going to happen now is, so the latest is Janelle Grant has amended her lawsuit. She has updated it. It went from 67 pages to 101 pages, something close to that. And she's added some other allegations. She alleges that, for example, Michael Hayes was receiving pictures that Vince told her to
Right.
send to him. There's some other details that are added. People are now named who were anonymized before. So again, the company is a party to this lawsuit, and there's a number of executives, including Nick Khan, who she alleges. She doesn't quite allege that he knew about misconduct, but she alleges that there were executives who were instrumental in enabling Vince to do what he did, according to her. So anyway, um, her lawsuit has now been updated. That's been approved, and this NDA that they signed, not only did they agree that Janelle Grant would get $3 million, and not only did they agree that there would be no disclosure of what happened between them, but they also agreed that if there were any disputes related to this contract, that they would go into private arbitration. Which kind of makes sense if you're going to have an NDA with someone. If you're going to have a legal dispute, you want that to be private too and not in public court. Um, and she has, in the defendant's view, violated that by filing this lawsuit. So that's what the judge has to decide. So um, the defendants will refile their motions to compel arbitration, which they have in the past, but it's been kicked down the road because of some other things. So they will refile soon. They have until June 13th to do that. At that point, the judge has also ruled that Janelle Grant gets to request motion-related discovery, whatever that means. Uh, she gets to request evidence that would be pertinent to deciding this issue of whether it should go to arbitration or not. It's a very complicated legal issue. And stop me if I get too deep into it, but
No, no, no.
ultimately she's going to have to argue that for some reason this arbitration clause should not be enforced. There is a law in the U.S. that was put into law in the weeks following this NDA being signed. Maybe it's the case that law applies, maybe not. But ultimately, there will be evidence, perhaps, that will help her make a case for this. The defendants will make their case for why any public policies should not apply to this, at least not sufficient to not compel arbitration. I bet there will be some litigation over what evidence really has to be given up by the defendants. So that's all going to take months. And at that point, eventually the judge will decide it goes to arbitration or not. Maybe some of the issues go to arbitration. Maybe some of them don't. I think there's a slight chance of that too. Um, so And at that point, you'll either go out of the public eye, or it will continue. At that, if it does continue in public court, maybe there's a settlement at that point because now the pressure would really be on the defendants. Maybe this gets all the way to trial though, and maybe I have to go to Connecticut. So we'll see.
A nice junket for you there, Brandon.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I would definitely consider it.
Yeah, look, a lot of road still left in the case. Mero briefly touched on, just to kind of completely throw a curveball at you and to flip the subject a tiny bit. Mero briefly mentioned Linda McMahon being part of the Trump administration,
Hmm.
and I remember you had an article about the Senate hearing a while ago, and just
Hmm.
like even from that point of view, the Linda McMahon factor in this, she's named in the ring boy, the ring boy situation, as you said. Like, is there the blending of power and politics? And obviously, Donald Trump, WWE years and years and years ago, and storyline and everything else. But just how, or is it even deemed bizarre that the carny world of professional wrestling has now infiltrated Washington, and she's in charge of education? Like, I don't know, looking on from Ireland, this just seems like such a bizarre situation, and it's the stuff of fiction, but it's not. Like, are we way off the pulse? Is this not all too strange?
Depends on who you ask over here. It's bizarre to me that the former president of the World Wrestling Federation is in charge of federal education. That's weird. Um, I understand her first pick this time around. This is her second time in the cabinet, by the way. She was part
Yeah,
of administration number one as small business administrator, which makes more sense. She's a
yeah,
successful business person. I understand she wanted to be, is it director of commerce, and that's gone to another major Trump donor named Howard Lutnick. Um, it's weird, yeah, for sure. As you guys mentioned earlier, like there was some coverage of the Ring Boy lawsuit leading up to her confirmation hearing for the Senate, who asked to approve her. It was brought up one time in the course of that hearing, and she didn't really have to directly address it, and she handled it, quite gracefully in terms of not having to answer it, but having, swept it away. Um, but there's maybe in another era that would have been prohibitive from somebody having such a major cabinet position, but not in this day and age, and not in this administration.
Do you think,
so
Brandon, do you think that there's been any reform in WWE in terms of, I suppose, transparency, governance, and stuff like that, or attitudes? Do we know of
Yeah.
any kind of changes as such?
Like I said, I mentioned earlier, there is at least this consensual relationships policy. This applies only to employees. Wrestlers are not employees, which is another story. But um, I think you look at the Lee Fitting story, and that is very questionable. Um, Yet, you can't prove a negative, but there are at least no additional stories of sexual misconduct that are like are that I know of. So hopefully there's been a culture change. You hear in people's public comments in their interviews, which of course they're going to be positive, but they do speak about how much different things are, at least for them creatively. How much better things are under Paul Levesque rather than Vince. Again, that doesn't necessarily speak to the environment or the how safe people feel in terms of being assured that they're not going to be assaulted or harassed. But as far as we know, everything's okay. But again, I point to the Lee Fitting hiring, and I wrote a big piece about it. Like I think it really raises questions about like I know Nick Khan is a very big agent in the sports media world, or was before he came to WWE to do a different job. Um, he had to have known, or could have easily found out what the story was about why he suddenly left ESPN days before the first episode of College Game Day at the beginning of the college football season. Um, it just raises to me like where are the ethics? And is it just, well, it's a publicly traded company, so our only ethic is shareholder value? Like what is a line? Where is the line? And I don't know if there is a line.
And it's nuts as well because also Triple H Paul Levesque has been asked in the past 12 months about where women stand in terms of the card of a pay-per-view or a premium live event, and also kind of being maybe softly challenged about black wrestlers.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't think it actually works in his favor as if to suggest that there was or there is any type of reform. I mean, we see Bobby
Hmm.
Lashley released before, you know,
Hmm.
it's doesn't look well, I don't think. I mean, if you're going through an era of, oh, it's the new era, Vince is gone, um,
Hmm.
you think you would try a bit harder because as we've seen with the women's division, whilst they do obviously get time on Raw and SmackDown, when it comes to PLEs, it seems like there's only room for one match per PLE. Now we do have, I suppose, the Evolution card coming up, but
Yeah.
is that just a soft token? Is that
Right.
tokenism?
Yeah. I mean, like he said something at forget the name of the conference. He was at a conference and said that he does, I think he was talking about women in this case, that he doesn't put women in the main event because, at least paraphrasing here, but he doesn't put women in the main event because, oh, it'd be good to have women in this main event. He says he puts them in there or doesn't because they've earned it or because that's the biggest thing on the show. And I think it is a careful balance between tokenism and giving people proper opportunities or giving people opportunities because it will have downstream effects in terms of, you know, opening the door for people down the line in the immediate future and the long-term future. Um, but I mean, I think there was a really curious PR phenomenon around WrestleMania this year in terms of a more right-leaning, in terms of multiple people around WWE being more willing to be praising Trump, which Paul Levesque did on a podcast, and Roman Reigns in an interview with Vanity Fair uh, praising Trump. Um, it was sort of this is a company that all through the Trump era has been very careful under Vince, who's supposedly great friends with Trump, been very careful to not touch politics, U.S. politics, because they know how divisive it is, and they don't want to turn off half of their audience in the process. There was during WrestleMania of all things, a willingness to be more openly, right leaning, which goes with the beginning of this administration really taking apart all these DEI policies and so forth. And I think it's at least consistent with WWE not being as concerned with that. If that's what's in vogue in the US in terms of, we're seeing a lot of corporations in the US, do away with DEI policies as well. I think there's among people who visit Mar-a-Lago, including Paul Levesque with his mother-in-law, I could see him feeling justified in that.
And it's like Hulk Hogan's appearance on the
Yeah.
Netflix. Like he got booed out of the whole arena.
Yes. Yes,
I
he
mean,
did.
what more representation do you want? I suppose LA is Democrat city,
Yeah.
but still, I mean, that was a big fu to Hogan.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So I think not only had Hogan done the Republican National Convention and really been an outright, an outward supporter of Trump, but he's also, I don't think people have forgotten the scandal that emerged around 2014 or 15, where he went on this racist tirade and used the N-word a number of times and described himself as a racist on the call, or on the recording. So and he's not somebody who has sufficiently apologized. Clearly, he's perceived to have basically advised people be careful because you could get caught. It was basically the moral of the story that he took away from his racist tirade recording being publicized.
Yeah, he gaslit the world, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of so he so Peter Thiel, who's a big Trump supporter, helped him with that recording being publicized by a company called Gawker. Peter Thiel, who's a billionaire and a major donor to and supporter of Donald Trump, funded Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, and that trial, which was an, uh,
Surreal.
there should be a movie about that,
Yeah,
um, but helped fund Hulk Hogan.
that's true. I think there was a Netflix series on it. I just remember the meme that came out of it was the Hulk Hogan penis or Terry Bollea penis
Right,
section of the court
right,
case, which
right.
just
There's a difference.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Brandon, it's been great talking, and we've only kind of scratched the surface on so many things. But I suppose when you're talking about these things, it's very hard to get in depth
Yeah.
and not get overly technical. You've done a really good job of bringing us up to date and helping us have a better understanding of how this might play out, how it is playing out, and kind of the nuance behind a lot of it. If people want to follow more of your work, though, where can they do so?
WrestleNomics.com is my main place where everything is. There's a lot of free stuff there, but if you want, I cover wrestling business too, by the way. I cover so what do I cover these days? I guess I've covered a lot of legal stuff lately, so I always have started to so I've started to try to mention, oh, I cover the business and I do a lot of data stuff and I cover a lot of legal cases, especially lately. So anyway, you go to WrestleNomics.com, you'll find mainly business coverage, but I also cover legal stories primarily these days for postwrestling.com, which is also that is John Pollock's outlet along with Wei Ting. And I co-host a podcast every week with John Pollock called Pollock and Thurston, very original name. You can find that for free on all your podcast apps and so forth. But if you want all the in-depth business coverage I do, that's at patreon.com/WrestleNomics, as well as on WrestleNomics.substack.com. Same content, same price on both platforms.
I loved last week on Pollock and Thurston where you covered the gate receipts for Irish promotion OTT at the Ambassador
Yes.
Theatre. I
Yes,
was driving in the
exclusive
car
news.
listening. Yeah, it was exclusive to me. I was driving in the car and I was like,
Yeah.
Brandon just mentioned OTT. And then I was very intrigued at what the gate was because the Ambassador Theatre has just reopened in Dublin. That was closed for many years and
Mm,
it's got a refurb and it's we had OTT owner Joe Cabray on the podcast before and they
mm,
had a home called the Tivoli Theatre, and me and Danny would have went to see them a good bit, and other friends, and it's a brilliant show, brilliant small production. But he was looking for a home for years to do his monthly show, and I think he's finally got it in the Ambassador Theatre because the rave reviews it's got. But it was great to hear it getting a mention. And I suppose Wei Ting and John Pollock did cover Jordan Devlin versus Walter, because that was one of the greatest main event matches that I've ever seen live in OTT. But big kudos to mention on OTT because it's a brilliant promotion.
yeah, but we get some obscure information sometimes, so
Yeah,
we always got to break the OTT ticket sales information when we have it.
Love it,
brilliant.
love it. Brandon,
Brandon, thanks
it's
so
been a
much.
joy, man. Thanks so
It
much
was
for your
deadly.
time.
Yeah, I had a great time talking with you guys. Thanks.
A fascinating and insightful chat with Brandon there, who you get the feeling he was dumbing things down as much as he possibly could without insulting his own intelligence for us. But we desperately appreciate it because it's a topic we're fascinated with. It's a topic. It's a morbid fascination, I suppose, given the severity and just the absolute the just disgusting nature of some of the accusations that are being put against Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, etc. But like it's it's one that I think people are aware of it, but they don't know about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's mad. He's 80 this year, so time is ticking. And
Indeed. Yeah, indeed.
we didn't even touch on it with Brandon, but Vince has started his own media company again. um 14th and 1 or something. I think it's to the significance of that name is that Capital Wrestling, his father's company in the 50s, was their office was that address.
Right.
So I don't know what the his new media company is gonna do. Um he's taken former colleague in WWE with him, Brad Bloom or something like that. I can't remember. But yeah, who
Right.
knows what the senile old man is gonna get up to, but he is and nonce.
Just a deplorable human. But great chat with Brandon, and do check out Wrestlenomics and Post Wrestling. His articles are brilliant.
Yeah, they're great.
And as you said, the podcast in that he does also is well worth a listen. But yeah, enjoyed that chat. So big thanks to Brandon for giving us his time and trying to give us the truth behind the madness. I
Yeah,
suppose. But yeah,
Absolutely. That's it now,
yeah,
Dan.
yeah. What are we going? Normally we're rushing off to watch whatever football match is on, but like,
Yeah, well, Germany, Portugal in the semi-final of the Nations League's on.
yeah, we've talked about this nation. I think we or was that on the setting? I can't remember. But the
It's a
Nations League is a cod.
full strength squad.
It's a cod though. Like I
I
don't.
enjoy it.
Look, I'll accept it during the summer because need a bit of sport and all that. But I just the Nations League. I don't know.
I enjoy it.
I don't understand it. I don't know what you have to do to get relegated from it. I don't know what you have to like. It's just the whole thing is a fair. And look, do you know what? That'll give us content on another episode someday. The ups and downs of the Nations League, even though there doesn't appear to be many downs, it just seems to be this weird fucking batch of friendlies.
And we're playing Senegal this week.
For a man who hates Test rugby, you like the Nations League. Okay.
Yeah, we do indeed. Well, the Nations League gets you helps you with qualification for Euros and World Cups.
So does Test match rugby, Graham.
Yeah, but there's only 8 countries in
Uh,
the
I,
Rugby World Cup.
I think you'll find there's more than eight.
Well, there's only 4 that can challenge.
Three, but whatever. Look, let's
Yeah. You've conceded to me for the
and
first time in 10
and
years. Danny, I think the podcast is 10 years old this
it is the end of this month.
the end of this month. Yeah,
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 at the end of this month, our very, very first episode, I think, went live. I want to say June 25th, could be June 26th,
yeah.
way
Right.
back in 2015. We didn't know what we were doing then. We don't know what we're doing now, but that's okay.
But we're enjoying ourselves.
We are. We are. Speaking of Test Rugby, I'll be in Lansdowne Road, Newa, the end of this month
For what?
for the Lions, Graham.
Are the Lions playing in Dublin?
They are for the first time ever. They're playing
Right.
Argentina.
Right. Is that because it's dominated by Irish players?
Could be. No, I think it's more so just they see the lucrative opportunity more so than anything else. Don't
You
even
were talk
see.
you were talking of the Nations League being a cod. The British and Irish Lions is the biggest cod in world sport.
That's definitely not.
It's it's an absolute abomination.
On what grounds?
Oh, you dream to play for your local club, you dream to play for your province, then you dream to play for your country. What is this British and Irish Lions thing? You don't like it's just a cod.
It's not though.
It is, it's a
It's
shambles.
it's the coming together of what was the home nations back in the day.
You used to only call them the British Lions.
This is politics for you, isn't it? The war is over, Graham.
No, it's
The
not at
war is
all
over.
politics. Not at all. The British and Irish Lions is a cod.
It's
Friendly.
it's
Friendly internationals.
it's not a cod. They're not friendly international. Well, some of them are friendly internationals, but the Lions series is not friendly internationals.
You don't get into the Lion series, do you?
Yeah, would you?
Oh
Why
my
wouldn't
God.
I? I'm not as hot on rugby as I was before, and I think we've
Because you
talked.
discovered it was a cod.
No, I didn't discover it was a cod, Graham. I got fed
Did.
up. The
You were
same.
being you were being contrarian years ago, and you
I
said,
definitely wasn't.
I'm going to like rugby to annoy people to see if people give a bollocks.
How could
And
I? Why would I be?
and then that fad, you just got bored of it, and you're like, oh, I don't even like rugby. I'll go back to F1.
Oh,
You're a cod.
Graham, there are accusations being leveled at me on the eve of my anniversary that I think, when you reflect on the statements you've made tonight, you'll regret them. I won't ask you to withdraw your comments, but I will ask you to consider them, and in the fullness of time, I expect them to be withdrawn. Okay?
I'll say
For the record, right, I was a Leinster season ticket.
you're going on real campy here.
I am, and I'll continue to do so, right? It's the
The
pose I'm in.
elbow, the palm, the hand down.
Yeah, and I was a Leinster season ticket holder for a number of seasons, and then I moved to Laois, and I couldn't be an arse driving up the road anymore, right?
Waste of money in the
The
fads.
the the forced atmosphere at rugby matches put me off. This bullshit of playing stuff over the tannoy to try and create atmosphere. It's like, if the
The
fans
the
aren't buying it, they're not buying
the
it. Don't go on, what?
the bellends at the match didn't turn you off, no?
Well, that's what turned me off football years ago as well. That's why I didn't go to a live football match for so long, because I hate this bullshit of I can't sit next to somebody who supports the opposite team for fear we start hooking the head off each other. Get a fucking grip of yourselves, which is Like that's fucking the type of shit you'd only expect at a Shamrock Rovers match against anybody else because Rovers can't behave themselves. The reality here is, if you're a football fan who can't go 90 minutes without wanting to puck the person beside you because they happen to be wearing a different colour shirt than you are, you're nothing but a wanker. End of story. End of episode. Graham, would people want this?
WTSpod.com. You can go back and search any of our podcasts from the last 10 years. You can go to any podcast provider, just type in WTS Pod, Podcast Republic, Spotify, Apple Podcast, anywhere, everywhere you get a podcast, just put WTS Pod. He's on Instagram, Dan Joe Murray. I'm on Instagram at Merrigamania, at WTS Pod on Instagram. And that's it. We'll talk to you next time. Don't know when next time will be, but maybe next week, maybe the week after, maybe the week after that. But we'll see you next time.
Clear eyes.
All hearts.
Can't lose. Lions. Lions.